visiting pbmusa.org. That's pbmusa.org.
Most investments today feel like second jobs. Real estate, you're a landlord. Stocks, you're a day trader. Crypto, you're a full-time researcher. You've got a life to live. Your investment should help you live it. That's why more Americans are choosing gold. Noble Gold has helped thousands protect their future with real physical gold. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com to get your free wealth protection kit. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. Past performance may not be indicative of future results. Investing in precious metals, including gold, involves risks. Consult with your tax attorney or financial professional before making an investment decision.
Now, from The Signature, a division of Esquire Bank Studios.
This hour of The Sean Thompson Show is sponsored exclusively by DonleyAuctions.com. They need your guns. Sell for top dollar. DonleyAuctions.com.
From the streets of Melrose Park to the trading floor of the Merc, he's fought for every dollar he's ever earned. And now, with personal liberty and our system of capitalism under assault in America, he's here to seize back our rights from the government. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the other, he's Sean Thompson. And this is The Sean Thompson Show.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, they're red, white, and blue.
The lie people prefer to believe versus the truth that may not be comforting. It's really a description of what is happening, not just in America, but around the world. My next guest is a very, very interesting woman. She is somebody who wrote a new book that is extremely important. She was a professor of English at the University of Ottawa. She is retired now. The new book, The Goddess That Failed, Feminism's Unending War Against Men, Families, and Civilization Itself. Her name is Janice Fiamengo. Janice, how are you?
I'm very well, Sean, and thank you very much for having me on your program.
Well, it's a very interesting topic, and I say this to you because I've always loved history. And I love the idea of what has happened. Obviously, I focus on American history only because I'm not Canadian. But the reality is, America has done such a tremendous benefit to the world because it allowed people to have their own property rights, their own property. And when you look at the successes among Americans, it's astonishing. And some of my favorite are among women. And I don't care if we're talking about Pleasant, Mary Ellen Pleasant, who's the first female millionaire. She was a former slave born in 1814 to 1904. She became a millionaire in San Francisco after the Civil War. It's truly amazing what she did. Or if you're talking about Madam C.J. Walker, who developed beauty care. Millions and millions of dollars, all born in the 1800s. And then all of a sudden they were sold a line of bull dung around the movement that I believe the Rockefellers financed. I believe the Rockefellers financed the feminist movement. They financed so much of what destroyed American society because they understood what it would do to society. Not only that, I also remember a gangster who used to hang around with Rockefeller, Adam Russo. Did you ever hear of this? And he hung around with, I think his name was Edward Rockefeller. He was the son of Nelson. And there was a scandal.
I've seen his interview.
Can I play it? I'm going to play it for the audience. And I think they'll love it. Hold on one second.
Well, one of the things they told me was that he was at the house one night, and we were talking, and he started laughing. He said, "Aaron, what do you think women's liberation was about?" And I said, I'm pretty conventional thinking about it at that point. I said, I think it's about women having the right to work, getting equal pay with men, just like they won the right to vote, And he started to laugh. He said, "You're an idiot." And I said, "Why am I an idiot?" He said, let me tell you what that was about. We, the Rockefellers, funded that. We funded women's lib, And we're the ones who got all over the newspapers and television, the Rockefeller Foundation. He says, and you want to know why? He says, there were two primary reasons. And one reason was we couldn't tax half the population before women's lib. And the second reason was now we get the kids in school at an early age. We can indoctrinate the kids how to think.
Seems like a plan that worked, doesn't it, Janice?
Unfortunately, yes. It's hard to argue against it. It has certainly created a vast division between men and women and between many groups in our society. So rather than focusing on how we can secure our freedoms and protect them against government power, instead what we do is we spend a lot of time talking about manspreading and mansplaining and toxic masculinity, and telling women that being married and having children is a kind of sex slavery that should be avoided, and it's much better to be a slave at the office than to work for somebody you love to make the home a beautiful place to raise children. So yeah, in all sorts of ways, it's a very sad situation, and that's why I wrote the book, to raise awareness about all the damage that feminism is doing to our society.
And it is such an insult to women who were before the so-called movement. And you think back of the women who survived wars in Europe, wars throughout the world, and the Depression itself. Some of the strongest women in history are women who survived the Depression and raised their families. They didn't need any formal movement or recognition. And now the very government that pretends to have helped women is now putting men in their bathrooms, in their sports. The insult is laughably sad, and it's really an insult to all genders, let alone the fact that we pretend, and when I say all genders, I mean both, but to all people. And it's almost nauseating to listen to these blowhard morons representing government pretending they did anything other than destroy the continuity that existed in all countries.
Yes, it is. I mean, that was the thing that really struck me when I started teaching, and I had swallowed all of the feminist lies. I thought that the whole history of humankind was the history of men oppressing women and women being required to be rescued and to struggle for their rights, etc. And I finally realized that it does such a great disservice to both men and women to believe that nonsense. In my book, I focus not so much on perhaps what is achieved by driving men and women apart and by convincing women that they're victims, but I'm very interested in why so many women have been quick to believe it, and why so many men, too, have believed it. Because it's one of the things that most struck me was the burden of shame that is placed on the shoulders of young men who, even if feminism was partly true, those young men have nothing to do with the alleged crimes of the past. They didn't benefit from any of that. They certainly didn't play any role in putting it into practice. And yet these young men are expected to pay for the rest of their lives. They're told that their sex is responsible for everything that's wrong in our society. And of course, we're told that all sorts of things are wrong, that America is a horrible white supremacist, colonialist, aggressor, misogynistic, colonizer country. And so young men are told that they're responsible for all that all they can do is apologize for it and take a step back and allow their sisters and female colleagues who are morally superior to lead us into some sort of utopian future. And it's very worrisome because we are now at the point where we're actually denying that men and women have a sexed nature, that there's anything naturally different between men and women in terms of their abilities, their preferences, their bodies, their minds, and that is very worrisome.
I can't decide if it's more Machiavellian or more Karl Marx. Fear, obligation, and guilt, the tenets of all isms, of all communisms, of all government, slavery. Yeah. Or if it's very Machiavellian, because it's really brilliant, right? In order to control somebody's judgment and character, you must first destroy it. And that's really what it really is, right? You hoist upon innocent people this notion of guilt of a crime or an offense they didn't commit, and they'll be happy to please you. It's how, I always was amazed that during the years and decades, and still now in all 54 countries in Africa, the slavery that exists. And you keep wondering, well, why don't they just destroy the slave master? And it's because they take away their character. They take away their judgment. They put them into obligation and guilt. So it's really exactly what they've done now through policy. But I'm wondering if it's really as big of a population as it would lead us to believe. That's the part that is always Machiavellian, right? They have to sell it as if it's a majority opinion, when I believe it's quite fractionally infinitesimal among actual human beings that interact on a daily basis. Maybe it's because I say this to you from a neighborhood that is insulated, as so many ethnic neighborhoods are, right? If you grow up in an Italian neighborhood, an Irish neighborhood, a Polish neighborhood, whatever, you're kind of only dealing with the people who you love. Very few people in the neighborhood I grew up with trust anybody who isn't from there, or even pay attention to what they say. I'm wondering if they're nearly as strong as they would want us to believe. Do you feel that they're the majority or a super minority?
I think they are a significant minority. And part of the problem is that they seem to be the majority because they are far more active and vocal, especially on social media, which is a blessing in some ways, but a curse in others. And I think especially for young women, the impression is that most women are feminists, and that most women want the things that feminists want and believe the things that feminists believe. And I don't think that is necessarily true at all, but I think that is a powerful motivator, and women are deceived by that. And women, I think, tend to be quite impressionable when they're young, especially those women who end up going to university. They tend to accept that what they're told by authority figures must have some validity. They don't realize that, the history of women and men working together in the United States to create a free and prosperous and vibrant civilization is a history of cooperation, not one of division and oppression. But I think that more and more young women are starting to be fueled by this sense of grievance, and more young men are starting to be cowed by this sense of, guilt, that there's nothing good about their sex. And so there was a recent survey, for example, this is in the UK, but I don't think it's that much different from North America. They surveyed young people under the age of 30. The young men, close to 3/4 of them, had a positive or very positive perception of women. So all the stuff we hear about how, men are misogynist, they hate women, they want to control women, they want to keep them down, turned out that wasn't true at all. And the vast majority, a super majority of men wanted to get married and have children. The poll suggested something quite different about the women. About less than 50% of the women had a positive or very positive impression of men. And when you got under 25, it was even worse. And less than half the number of women as men wanted to get married and have children. So we are seeing, I think, a general divide between men and women. And I do think that feminism has had a huge role to play in that. And of course, as you mentioned, the underlying Marxist impetus, this whole idea that, that marriage, the women in marriage are in the same position as the oppressed worker, under the evil capitalist system, which is exactly what Frederick Engels said in 1884 in The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State, based on Marx's papers. So that does worry me. The fact that women are less and less happy is very worrisome. Every poll, every survey that's been done shows that since the 1970s, the inauguration of the second wave of feminism, women's self-reported happiness and life satisfaction has gone down. And people who report these surveys are always surprised. And they clearly think that economic independence, other types of autonomy, sexual freedom, those sorts of things, that those should be making women happier and more satisfied, but they're not. And that's not surprising to me, because happiness is, as most significant philosophers and the church fathers would tell us, happiness is not a feeling, it's a life lived according to the principles of reason and virtue. But we've stopped teaching that to our young women, and so it's not surprising, I think, that they are. In fact, we encourage our young women to rage, to feel that they are victims, and to dwell on that, and to feel resentment and envy. And so I think that's very sad, too.
Well, what's fascinating, and I'm wondering if you tackle this in the book, is when you look back at the generations of women that were not told by doctors or their society that they were depressed. And you look back to the women who, and I was raised by women, and I was raised by, I had the blessing of living with my grandparents. And my grandmother had gone through the Depression. And I mean, dirt poor. Her mother burned when she was 9 years old, died in front of her. And I never heard her say, I'm depressed, I have anxiety, I'm unhappy. In fact, what those women would do, and those people who survived that, they would instill in the kids that they were around that their outlook was the only thing they could control. Their outlook. The only thing you make 30,000 decisions a day, but the first one is if you're going to decide to be happy or sad. And when you look at society, that tells you from almost the time these kids are exposed to people outside of their house that there's something wrong with them. You have attention deficit disorder. You have a disability. You're depressed. You're this. You know, the word spreads, and it's easy to be a victim. So I think part of the way they sell this is they first must sell you're a victim of your own character, your own lack of judgment. That's what I'm wondering. Where did you track it as when you're doing the book? Where do you think it starts? Because it starts from, in my opinion, it can start from a bad parent, no question about it, which is why I believe in divorce. If you're hooked up with a bad parent, the best thing the good parent could do is get you the hell away from them. But where do you think it starts outside of the house? Does it start in the schools, or does it start now because everybody's inundated with advertising through, as it used to be called the boob tube, now it's called television or media, or now it's in your hand as social websites and whatnot? Who's more culpable for this?
I would say all of the above, and I agree with you that it is far too easy to be a victim in our society. Even worse than that, it is now a kind of moral badge of honor. It is what supplies identity. It supplies authenticity. It supplies a kind of conviction that one has a special right to speak and to be heard and to lecture to others. And so I think that's one of the ways that feminism and all of these other isms as well has really ruined people's lives, is that instead of talking about virtues and talking about self-restraint and being cheerful, making the best of things, being forward-looking, feeling gratitude for what we have in North America, the incredible civilization that our forefathers built, the precious gifts of freedom and innovation, we don't get any of that. Instead, people are told that they've been born in the wrong body, or that they have been discriminated against, they've been held back. Nothing is their fault. And what they should feel is this overpowering sense of anger and bitterness and blaming others, blaming society, and demanding that things be changed so that their needs will be recognized. It's very worrisome. Obviously, it promotes socialism. It promotes learned helplessness, and it certainly makes people deeply unhappy.
You know what's nauseating is if you look at the statistics of how many Americans are on antidepressants. It's a staggering number.
Staggering.
Upwards of in the high 20s of percentage of how many people are on antidepressants.
It's terrible.
And do you know what else happens when you turn your children over to teachers? I mean, you know this because you were a professor. Yes. When you turn your children over to teachers, you have no idea as to who these people are in the form of their character or how they live their life.
Yes.
I wonder how many, if there's ever been a study done, how many professors and how many teachers in all levels of education are on antidepressants. Do you think that would be something that would be very interesting? I mean, I think if someone knew I was going to turn my kid over to somebody, a woman or a man, who couldn't function without a drug that tells them they're not depressed, even though the side effects of the antidepressant are sometimes more than just oily stool. Sometimes it's more depression and suicidal thoughts. So this is something that I think as students, as kids, do you not have the right to know if your teachers are on antidepressants?
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting question. Certainly we know that antidepressant use and depression, negative feelings, lack of self-worth, anger, discontent, bitterness, all of those things are certainly closely associated with particular ideologies. And we know that it is progressivism, the far left ideology, that most provokes all of those negative feelings. And if we look at the teaching profession and especially higher education, they've done all sorts of surveys about the ideological leanings of those people. And they basically range from left to far left. Many of them are self-declared communists, Marxists, or socialists. I had a professor in one of the departments I worked in, and he had a picture of Lenin up on his office door. And many of these people see it as their purpose as teachers, not to teach students knowledge, certainly not to transmit an inheritance to them, our wonderful cultural inheritance, but instead to turn them into foot soldiers for radical ideology, to indoctrinate them. And so yes, I think the depression, the rage, the bitterness, all of that come with the ideology, and the ideology is now explicitly being part of the teaching. It's stunning that we allow that to go on. I really think that we will have to fundamentally change the entire education system if we're going to save our civilization.
Well, and we could do it through our own history. We could do it through our own history. You know, you hear a lot of people on the right, they talk about the founding fathers. And when you look at them and you break it down, a tremendous amount of them were kids in today's comparison of kids. I mean,
yes.
Many of them were teenagers. When you look at the percentage of them that were raised by their mother, whether it's George Washington or Benjamin Franklin, their fathers either died or they were thrown out of the house at a very young age. And you look at how many of them were raised by women. And you look through history at some of the strongest men in the world, they were raised by women. But if you look at the kind of women that raised them, they weren't women that hated men. They were women that loved their kids, and they loved the principles of what men could do or women could do. So you just see a weakness in the character that is really overwhelming when you think how susceptible people are. And I think we've come to the conclusion it's the left in general, but more importantly, it's the education system. So I love the idea when I read these statistics of homeschooling. I think that is the way to save the future. And when you look at the silver lining of COVID, more and more people are doing that.
Yeah.
That's the real answer to saving the world, isn't it?
Oh, I absolutely agree that what COVID did for us all was that it made clear what was going on in so many classrooms across North America, and many parents who had assumed that things were generally well realized that they absolutely were not. So I certainly agree. In Canada, it's very difficult to homeschool. The government very much frowns on it and makes it difficult. I know that some European countries outlaw it. Certainly if I had my life to live over again, that would be the route that I would go. Yeah. And I think a lot of smart parents are deciding to do that. There are so many wonderful things to learn, and we are so blessed to live in free countries. And I'm a great admirer of the United States. And I think it is such a shame that we send our children off to be taught to hate their own country and to hate one another, of course, but to hate their own country and not to appreciate what the generations that went before us, and what many men who died, and of course women suffered too, in order to save the system. We were quite prepared to throw it away in order to achieve some sort of utopia where people don't have to work and where we'll all be looked after by the government. It's truly staggering.
Well, and it's the reverse too, as when kids were taught, and like myself and so many of the people I know, one good teacher can change your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, just think about what 100 bad ones can do. So I love the idea that a good one wrote this book. I cannot wait to get the book. It's out now, correct?
It is out. Yes, it is.
I love it. The Goddess That Failed, Feminism's Unending War Against Men, Families, and Civilization. It's out now. Where do you prefer everybody buy it, Janice?
Oh, wherever they want to. It's available on Kindle. It's on Amazon. It's at the site. So I would be pleased or they can borrow it from the library. I want the ideas to get out there. I want us to stop being under the illusion that feminism is just about equality. It has nothing to do with equality. And it's important that we understand from feminists' own mouths, because I quote extensively from feminists, that we see what exactly they believe and what they want and what they're bringing about, because it is nothing to do with what most of us think. And I would also just like to say that if anybody would like to come to my Substack newsletter, which you can subscribe to for free, you can see the kinds of things I write about and whether they're the sort of things that are of interest.
And I think you were predetermined way before you were even born to write this book. Your name is Fiamengo. I love that. Janice Fiamengo. So thank you very much for writing the book and making time. I look forward to the next time. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. We'll be back with your calls and comments.
He's Sean Thompson.
Hello, Mr. Thompson.
And this is the Sean Thompson Show on AM 560. The Answer.
Rashaw talks about building income in retirement.
You know, you can actually